Hey everybody, and thank you for joining me on my second installment of the Getting Started in Unreal Engine 5. My name's Kirk, and I'm an environmental artist, level designer and shader creator, and I've been using Unreal Engine for the past few years now, and thought I would share my knowledge with you guys. What we're going to look at in this episode of Getting Started in UE5 is basically getting a project started and points to take when starting a new project. Once we've started a new project and are in Engine, I will briefly go over some of the controls, the UI, and just a basic rundown of the basic controls that you will need to know when using Unreal Engine. After that, I will be creating a new series which is all about environmental art, and there will obviously be separate videos in there, otherwise it'd be about 12-13 hours long, but there will be separate videos in there regarding shaders, materials, textures and landscapes and lighting, environment lighting and all sorts. So don't forget to hit that subscribe and that like button. So anyway, let's get on with it. So from here, from the last video, if you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. The card will be up to the top right now of the screen. In the last video, we basically installed the engine. I give a rundown of the Epic Games launcher where you can find the Unreal Engine and change a few settings in which will help you save space when using the engine. But from now we are going to create a project. So by now you should have the engine installed. It should be preview 2 if you want to stay along with me. If it is not preview 2 but you have got Unreal Engine 5 installed, then make sure you have updated the engine to the most recent. If it's not offering the update, then it will be a slightly different UI, as the Preview 2 UI is a little bit different from the early access version. But the manner of things is still the same. What we will be looking at is still the same, but in the early access version they will be in a different place, but not a massively different place, but slightly different. So let's go ahead. What we're going to do now is quickly just click launch. Once you click launch, what launch is going to do, it's going to open the UI in which you can select multiple things for your project. So looking here now, you can see that the launcher for the project has opened up. And on the left side you are going to see a couple of columns. One's recent projects, that's pretty self-explanatory. These are a couple of projects I've got in. Beneath that is the games. It's probably about 75% used by most people in Unreal Engine. You have a blank project, which is just a blank project, nothing's been applied, or you can select from one of these multiple templates here. You can have first person, third person, top down, handheld for mobiles, virtual reality and driving games. These templates are quite handy to have if you're creating a game. I would recommend if you are following along because you're interested in level design and environmental art, it's best practice to start with a third person template as you get the mannequin inside the third person template, and it is used for scalability when creating a scene, which you will see in the next series, which covers environmental art. Beneath that are a few other tabs which are relatable to certain industries like the film and video, where you get VFX for your cameras and DMX. I'm not sure about these, I don't create movies. And you have architecture, which is ArchViz. If you're interested in ArchViz, there is a couple of YouTubers on YouTube, obviously, that are good with ArchViz. You may want to go search them. I don't think I'll be covering ArchViz on this channel at any point, as I have not really done any architectural design using UE4 or 5. Below that is automotive. For myself, similar to above the architecture, I've not really used this, but you also get templates in there as well, which could be useful. I think if you open this up and select a say, where is it? The photo studio, you do actually get a car model inside it, but I'm not 100%. But back to the games tab, we're going to select third person. On the right hand side, it gives you a quick image and what to expect when you load up Unreal Engine with this template. A brief description underneath that regarding the template. And below that is interesting stuff where you have blueprints. Blueprints are carry cases for actors, but in this respect, a blueprint is visual scripting and C++ is manual scripting. If you choose C++, you will need a compiler. Unreal Engine recommends Virtual Studio to type your code out. You can do Virtual Studio, but if you are going to code, me personally, I would advise to use Visual Studio Code instead of just Visual Studio, as the implementation for code and the compiler speeds is much better using VS Code. As you can see from the installer here, the warning here, it's asking for a compiler. But we're going to select blueprints. If we need to do any form of code, it will just be in a blueprint, visual scripting. Below that you have a target platform, which is either desktop or mobile, so obviously mobile, or desktop, which is Windows, Mac, or any form of software like that. We're going to leave it on desktop. Quality preset, leave that to maximum, so you get maximum fidelity when using the engine. You can have scalable. I'd recommend that for really low-end computers, because you can change your resolution. Basically, as it says there, scalability and quality, some features are disabled by default but can be enabled based on the actual hardware of your PC, which I added on to the end of that. But maximum high-end features default to enable maximum quality. We're going to leave it on maximum. Below that, your starter content is completely down to you whether you enable it or not. I'd probably recommend it personally, especially for beginners. Even experienced UE4, UE5 users have starter content, as it does have content in there that is quite useful. Ray tracing, we will be covering that, or using ray tracing in our scene setup, and we will go through using ray tracing whilst creating environments. Anyway, that's enough of that. To the bottom left you have project location. This basically opens up a window like when you're using Windows, and you can just save your project to your project folder. I'd recommend using an SSD for this. I've got a terabyte SSD in which I put my projects on, and just plonk it in there and save your projects. To the bottom right you have a project name. You can change this to whatever you want. I am going to change it to UE5 underscore basics underscore YT. You may be asking yourself why have I put underscores in my name. Unreal Engine does not allow for spaces, as you can see in the bottom left under the project. Project name must not contain spaces, nor can it use special characters like so. It has to, if you want to have spaces in your name, use underscore. 9 times out of 10, I just will not have spaces. Well, that's completely down to preference. And then from there, that is basically the UI for the launcher of the project. Just simply click create, and once this may take some time for you, depending on your specs of your computer. If you have a decent PC or decent machine, shall I say, this shouldn't take too long. But if it's the first time you're starting up the engine, it may take longer than normal. But I will pause the video and be back once it's created. Okay, so by now you should have your engine open. You may get some pop-ups to start off with at the bottom right. Might ask you to update your project files. Would you like to do so? You can just click update. It just updates them. You may also have a pop-up that says manage plugins. Just dismiss that for now. And let's get started. So as you can see here, the big main screen we're seeing right, gone all crazy. The big main screen here we're seeing is the 3D viewport. This is probably where you're going to be working for 90% of your time, as you can see. And what we're looking at here is the third person template, as it says on this text down here. It's a third person template, and this is what you'll be presented with, so don't be alarmed. Don't be confused by anything you see down here. We will go over that shortly once I quickly go through the controls. So what I'm going to do now is hold my right mouse button down. Just hold it down and you can just move it about so you can see everywhere. You can also use the WASD or WASD keys on your keyboard, which will move you around. If you're accustomed to playing first-person shooters like myself, then this will be fairly easy for you. If you're not accustomed to WASD or WASD, you can use the arrow keys as well, which are at the bottom right of your keyboard generally. To mount, and if you hold your mouse controls, it will your right mouse button down, you can move your viewport around, or your camera should I say. More mouse controls here. If you scroll in and out with your middle mouse button, it will just basically move your camera forwards and backwards. It can be useful, and very useful actually. Your left mouse button could change you left to right, spin you around left to right. If you push forwards and backwards, it will actually move your camera forwards and backwards at the same time. You can hold Q on the keyboard or E on the keyboard and it will pan you up and down at the same time. You can also hold left mouse button and right mouse button and it does the same thing. It will pan you left and right and up and down. This can be quite useful as well. But that's it for the mouse controls, I think. Yeah, that's it for the mouse controls. So what we're looking at now is the template. We are going to start at the top left. As you can see, you have the file, edit, window tools and all these icons at the top like you would generally get in any kind of software. Don't worry about what you're seeing on screen right now, as these things will come alight as we get further down into videos on the channel. But these are your general standard options up here. So below here you have your little save button. What that does is just saves your current scene at that present time. It doesn't save your project, it just saves the scene. That is very important to remember. So this just saves the scene as it is. To save the project as a whole is in the content drawer here. I will go through that shortly. But next to that is the select mode. So you have options here: your landscape, foliage, mesh paint, modeling, fracture, brush editing and animation. Like I said previously, at some point we will be going through these as our channel grows and the videos grow. We will be hitting on some of these. At the right hand side of these names you can see there's a shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. So if you're not in there, if I press shift 2, that'll bring up the landscape mode. If I press shift 3, it will bring up the foliage mode. And to change back you can just press shift 1 and that will put you in the standard select mode, or you can use a drop down menu here like so. And next to that you have the quick add button. This is relatively new to UE5. It's similar to Place Actors. Place Actors, you can find that in your Windows tab at the top. Move down and you'll see Place Actors and a little pop-up will add in here. But as you can see, that takes up a lot of 3D viewport. You can actually move it like a normal window, like so. but I simply prefer to use the drop down menu there, so I'm going to cross that off, and that is basically this. But you also have a get content section, which is import content, which you can simply import content to a certain folder. So if I press OK on content, press OK there, and you have downloaded custom assets, if you like, or you've been working in a 3D modeler, and wherever you saved your 3D model, you can come and find it here, add it in, and it will add it to the folder you select. So if you press import content, say I choose starter content, and click OK, go and find my mesh or my texture, whatever I want to import to the engine, click open, and it will import it into that folder that you selected at the start. Underneath that is Quixel Bridge. Quixel Bridge, as stated in my first video, my first ever video on the channel, is very important with UE5 and environmental art and level design. There'll be a more in-depth look at Quixel Bridge probably in my first episode of my next series, which is around environmental art. We'll go into detail on how to use Quixel Bridge. You will need your Epic account to log into Quixel Bridge. Beneath that is Unreal Engine Market, the marketplace, similar to my first episode again, where I go over the marketplace. Below that is the content browser. This is the same as the focus content bar at the bottom here, which will show you shortly. You can simply come on there and open yourself an extra content browser. So if you have a secondary monitor, you can move it over, or you can just simply add it to your screen like so, and move this across, and you have your content browser there. Why you would do that is beyond me, but it's each to their own, I suppose. And that's them. And then all these are the basic shapes, basic actors, cinematics, visual effects, volumes, all classes. Like I've said multiple times already, these will be used more and more as we get deeper into the engine in my coming videos. Next to that is your blueprints. Blueprints are a different story. Very, very useful. Very useful. Let's see if we can find one here. So there is not actually a blueprint here. What a blueprint does is very useful. So say I have a static mesh here, this crate, and this crate, and this crate. You can move them to wherever you want, like so. Let's just try and give a brief one. So you want all your cubes stacked on top of each other in a certain way. Just move that like that. So you want your cubes stacked like that. You can create a blueprint and stack your cubes like that and save it into your folder system, and it will stay like that, and then you can just simply keep dragging the blueprint actor in as when needed. We'll go through blueprints as the videos progress. They are very useful, and that a blueprint is where you will be primarily using visual scripting. So yeah, moving on from there is your level sequencer. This is where you will use animation. You can set up, if you're doing a mini movie, you created a scene and you want a decent camera to travel through your scene, you can do this with a level sequencer. And next to that is your play button, and this basically drops you into your character, and you can simply use the same keys as navigating the viewport. You can simply use it on here as well, like a first person shooter. And then you will simply press escape to get out of that view mode, out of the play mode. Also, to get in play mode, you can click anywhere on your mesh, right click on your mouse, a drop down menu appears, and then you can simply at the bottom click play from here, and it's the same thing. Okay, so as you see there, you right click this here, really good things to have good things to use, but like I've said previously many times, we'll get to using these as we move along. So from there you have these platforms. You can select what platform you want to use, like Android, virtual reality, Apple, Linux ARM64, I'm not sure what that is, and your TV operating system, and Windows, and many of other things here. But you'll probably never really use this. I never really do, but it's dependent on what you are doing. Okay, so at the top left is your 3D viewport. You have various options which we will end up using at some point. Like you have your field of view, you can change. I'm just going to pull that back to 90. You can also show your FPS, which will show your frames per second, which is useful. And if you keep when I select these things, you also have the shortcut keys at the side of it as well, which is quite good. Next to that is perspective view, which is your 3D viewport. So you can just change that here. So you have the top wireframe view, this is very useful if you're placing what those M3 crates are placed. It's very, very useful for lining things up really neatly. Just change that back to perspective, and you can change that there. You also have cinematic viewport, which gives you a detailed cinematic view using the camera actor. These are good for testing out certain lightings situations in your scene. So we've got a default viewport. These are a long list of how can we say complexity, where you can view certain things to see the performance if you like. So you can change view mode. If you're in lit and you're using ray tracing and your scene is absolutely ginormous, it will start jittering like so at some point. So you can, if you're editing your scene, you can switch to unlit mode, where it reduces all intake of light, then for increasing the performance on your scene. And you can still select and move things as normal. And you can also choose wireframe like we've seen in the other viewport just briefly before. These are really good to check the topology and the vertices of your mesh. As you can see, the iverts there. So yeah, have a little play about there. You can have detailed lighting as well, which will give you a decent view of what kind of lighting is affecting what. So yeah, that's really good to know. Show, this can toggle on and off things in your scene, like say you want to see your scene without all the sky, so you will come here, click atmosphere, and it gets rid of your atmosphere. And what's that down there? That is your exponential height fog. That's quite far away. So yeah, so you can just quickly get rid of your atmosphere, and like your static meshes here, you can go to static mesh, get rid of all that as well, and it just enables you to add certain things and get rid of certain things. Let's just put them back on. And that's what them buttons do. At the top here, top right, these are quite important buttons, so please be aware. To the left you have select mode, you have translate objects and rotate and scale. These are useful. You also have keyboard shortcuts, so you have W on the keyboard, which is translate, E on the keyboard, which is rotate, and R on the keyboard, which is scale. So these are probably, you're going to be using these the most. And once you have a mesh, let's just use this blue one for visibility. I'm just going to quickly move it. Oh, wrong, that happens. I'm going to move it over here so we can see it better. Okay, as you can see, I've selected the mesh, the static mesh, and you see this little thing here. It's called a pivot point, and it basically enables you to move your object in whatever direction you want. So right there, red, the red axis indicates you are moving forwards and backwards. The x-axis is left to right, which is the green axis, and your blue axis is Z, and light is up and down. If you look in the details panel right here, which we'll go over in this shortly, you can see these numbers change, or I might just change the numbers actually. and you can see that it moves incrementally like so. So it's always good in here. Say I've got one, I'm going to go 1, oh no, it's gone wrong. I'm going to go 1, 5, 5, 6, press that and it moves it. And you can go 1, 5, 5, 7, it moves it one more unit, or 1, 6, 6, 0, it'll move it quite a bit. And it just enables you to have a more detailed approach on your movement. And the same goes for your rotation and your scale. You have a padlock here on your scale, so if I put 2 in here, it will change the scale. 3, 4, and 5, it will change the scale. Let's go back to 1. If I click the padlock like so and change this to 2, it will scale it all 3. It's the same. As you can see, the other axes are changing at the same time. Okay, so you can see these numbers can be changed as well as using it on your keyboard. So shortcut E changes to rotate, and you can rotate it like so. You press Ctrl and Z to go back to normal. You've got R, which is the scale. If you see the axes highlight, like the red highlights when I hover over it, I'll zoom in the video so you can see. The green axes highlights as you go over it, and the blue axes highlights as you go over it, to let you know you've highlighted it. And if you go to the white box in the middle, that highlights all of them, so if you click and hold, and you can actually scale it as full. As you can see in the details panel, my numbers are changing at the same time. If you watch the numbers as I scale it, it goes from 0.75 to 1, and then I'll go 1.25, so it's going up incrementally. And what that is these at the top here. As you can see here, this switch enables or disables snapping objects to a scaled grid. So if I have 111 right now, keep watching these numbers as I do it. I untick this, go to that center point again, click and hold, and it scales it up using all these numbers like so. And I'm just left clicking and holding whilst I scale, and then you can simply toggle this back on. I'm going to reset, this little arrow resets the scale back to 111. To the right of that scalability toggle, the grid toggle, you have the scaling options. So for my scaling, you'll see that it's jumping like boing, 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 boing. It's doing it incrementally, as you can see. So if I click on this, I can change that to 1. So now it's at 1. If I change it, it will go to 0, then back to 1, and then 2. So it's changing every 1 unit. Or you can do it even smaller, which is 0.03125, which will scale it very small. Not the size, just the increment. You're just changing the increment. Also click on that. I'm going to set it back to normal. Preserve non-uniform scale. When this option is checked, scaling objects that have a non-uniform scale will preserve the ratios between each axis, snapping the axes with the largest value. So basically what this is saying is, if your scalability is like now, like it's at 1.0625, if you click this to preserve it, it will keep scaling at that scalability, if you know what I mean. So if it was at 1.2, like so, and then I click on preserve non-uniform scaling, it will go up incrementally in 1.2 in 0.2s. If you can see that, it's going up 0.2 every time, and that is basically what it is doing. Very useful to have, but I always leave it disabled, and then that's that. The same goes for the rotation. They're the same. Divisions of 360, these are useful, and these are common degrees in which you can rotate. But it's the same thing. You can click to disable the rotation. I'm pressing E to change to rotation, and I'm just rotating. But if I do it incrementally, you can see it jumps like so. And the same goes for the grid snapping, which is here. I'm pressing W to change to grid snap, to translate. Let me reset the rotation, which is rotation in the details panel here. just press the little arrow and that resets it to default, and that also, and that also. Oh, it's disappeared. This is a good opportunity to quickly show you what this means. So my cube here is already selected in the outliner. If I click on it and press F, oh no, I've changed. Control Z to go back. Click off it. If I press F, while it is highlighted, it will take me to the cube. As you can see, it's just put it to the center of the world. Put it back here. Okay, so as you've seen then, I moved it quite strangely. If I'll zoom in the video, you can see you've got your two axes and then these are joined by two. Similar to when you highlighted all the axes, you can highlight two. So if I go onto that little square corner side and highlight it, I can move it on just them two axes. And same goes for this. Highlight them two axes and change it on them axes as well. So yeah, that is the simplest way I can explain the pivot point and moving and scaling. Let's go ahead and sort all these back out. Okay, so as you can see, my axes are pointing relevant to my 3D object. If I go to the top here, you'll see this cycles the transform gizmo coordinate system between world and local. So what that is saying now, at the moment, if I rotate this a little bit, it will show it better. At the moment, the pivot point, as you can see, left, forward and up is not changing. So if I rotate that even more like so, the pivot point has still not changed. But if I reset the rotation to better show this, if I change this to local and rotate now, you can see the pivot point has changed with the 3D object. Change to this again, rotate a bit more, and the pivot point has changed to where the local space of the 3D object. So the pivot is enclosed in the 3D object and moves with the 3D object as well as rotating with the 3D object. So if I have it like this now, if this may show it better, I could change it back to world and do that, and the pivot point changes back to world space. So now the pivot point is based on the world grid, which is here. You can see the world grid. It's based off that, but then you can change it to local as well, which is local to the object. World grid is done by default. I would recommend leaving it on world grid unless really necessary, as it will stay aligned with the rest of your scene. So yeah, and that's them toggles at the top right. So moving on now to the outliner. The outliner is basically the container that holds all objects and all things that are contained in your project or in the 3D viewport. So on it, if I find, let's find the skylight, which is there. If I click the eye, it turns off the skylight. You can see all the shadow happening here. And turn on the skylight. Let's try sky atmosphere, and then you can turn off the sky atmosphere and turn it back on again. And volumetric cloud, which is the cloud, you can turn that off and back on again. Very simple. But this basically, all the actors for this world are contained in the outliner. As you can see, they have some sort of crappy folder structure going on right now. So to create these folders, very simple. I'll just quickly demonstrate that right now. I have a couple down here. I am pressing left click on that top mesh. I want to select all three. Hold your left shift down, similar to Windows, and select Cube 3, and it will select all of them. And then what you can do from here, you can right click and you can browse to asset, which will browse to the asset in your content drawer at the bottom. Or you can come down to the bottom and click create new folder, which I will do now, and just put 111, and there you go, it has its new folder structure in place. What I'm going to do is click all these again and drag them out of the folder, go to root, and there you go, we're back in the root folder. I'm going to click and delete this. I'm going to select all three cubes again quickly, and you can also do it with this plus icon. It will create a folder 121, and it will put all the blocks in the folder for you. Left shift, click and move to root. We're just going to head and delete this. As a bit of advice, I would make it a top priority when creating a scene to have a decent folder structure, as this can get filled up. Right now it's quite empty, but if you took them out of these blocks folders, this is really bad folder structure, but that's just a personal preference. If you don't have a folder structure, you'll just end up with this, and that's just from this, what you're seeing in scene right now. Just these. Imagine you have a massive scene, landscape scene full of rocks, trees, grass, the lot. All this will get clogged up very, very quickly, so it's very important to keep a decent folder structure right from the get-go. Okay, so moving on from there, below that we have the details panel. Details panel is very important to anything you are doing. So you could change, you've seen little bits of the details panel up to now, from when I've been showing previous things, changes and things. But here you have certain things, like you can see what static meshes. You can simply click this as well, and it will browse to the asset wherever that is in your folder structure. We'll get to this draw shortly. And then you have your material. You can browse to the material as well, and it just very helpful. If I say I have let's open and I select this grey, these grid prototype grids, these are for level building. This is for another tutorial, but very useful. If I come back to my material elements on my static mesh, which is this cube, and click this little arrow here, I've got this material selected. I click the arrow and it should change that material. Click it again, click the arrow. Doesn't really want to play ball today, but you can also click and drag and hover over and change it onto that cube. This grid material is very good. I will show you how to make these at some point, but they're also available anyway. The good thing about this is it doesn't stretch. It just goes out in increments based on what you set in the material itself. Right here, the grid size. But this is completely different from what we need right now. So I'm just going to come back up, reset the scale, and go back to normal. But your details panel is all the details and changes you can make to a single static mesh, or anything really. So if I go to lighting, I have my exponential height fog, and this details panel has all of the details that I need. As you can see, I've got a fog density there. If I get rid of that, if you look at the horizon here, I can change this and add more exponential height fog to the scene, which is quite good. You can change the height fall off, as you can see there. But the sun is not being affected by the fog, which I think Unreal should really change, but that's just a personal preference. But you can change it yourself, and that is probably going to be in my first video on the scene setup, how to do that. So that's the details panel. Quickly moving on, because this video is getting quite long. This is your content drawer at the bottom. Content drawer is quite important, as it does store all your assets and materials and meshes, everything you're using in your scene. Similar to the outliner at the top right, you would need to keep a good folder structure right here, otherwise it can get very clogged up with all the assets you import. What I tend to do is just right click on your content on the folder at the side here. You should see this right here, but if not, you can show favorites. Oh no, wrong, but go back to show favorites, and this will basically enable the favorites tab at the side. Where is it? I'm looking for show folders. Yeah. So you want to show your folders, you're going to need them. I'm trying to find out, where is it? source panel. That's it. Anyway, we'll get to that. So basically, what I do is drag these these 3 folders here. Sorry, hold on. And I generally drag them into these starter content to set up a folder structure. But I'm just showing you the UI of the content drawer right now. But we'll be setting up. We'll be going through all this in detail in my future videos. But that's your settings where you can change all settings, like your thumbnail size. Let's have it tiny. It's a bit too small. My eyes are not that good. I'll have it small. Just basically, you know, your normal things like lists, like in Windows. When using materials, if I go to materials like this, I tend to change this one to columns, as it shows me all the details that I need to know based on that material. I'll just change it back to default. But that's just another thing. You can dock in layout, so like Unreal Engine 4 used to have the content drawer like this. It used to just be there all the time, but obviously that really reduces your visibility in the 3D viewport, hence why they came up with the content drawer. And I'm going to cross that off, and I've still got my content drawer at the bottom. So yeah, to do this, like any Windows folder structure, you just right click, new folder, blah 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 blah, and you can do this. You can right click, change color. I'm going to set that to some sort of pink, and then you can go in there. So now your folder's mixed in with all these. You can right click, where's add to favorites? Where's add to favorites? Well, there it is, add to favorites. And what that's going to do now, you can close this down and open your favorites, and then you just have that one folder to work with. And I generally do that because once you start adding assets into your project, this list gets awfully big. Pardon me. So it's always good to have your own little project folder where you can simply open up anything you want, like a blueprint. Get this lamp and move it. I'd recommend copying it so you're not editing that. And then you open this, and as soon as you copy something from another folder, press F2 on the object and you can change the name, and that way you're now just changing this blueprint instead of the one that is in Engine. Let's go ahead and delete that. But yeah, that is the basics of the content drawer. You can import here as well, similar to what I was showing you before. Instead of like here where you have to select where you want to import to, basically on this one you could just be in your folder and just click import, and it'll ask you where you want to import. You can add things to your folder as well, like so, and you can get the same menu by right clicking in the folder as well. So yeah, so that is basically a video a lot longer than I wanted it to be, but it's more of a decent understanding of the UI and where to find things and whatnot. If you found this remotely interesting or useful, then hit the like and subscribe buttons for me, please. It will really help me as I am getting started on my channel. There will be more videos to come, obviously. I've mentioned a few times now. As you can see there, it's auto saving at the bottom right. That's normal. You can just simply click save now. Oh, one last thing before I go. If you, like I said earlier, if you click select, it saves your scene. But if you click this and save all, it saves your whole project, whatever you've been working on. But yeah, that's it. So yeah, if you do like it, like, subscribe, and do the little bell thing, and then you'll know when my next video is out. And I shall see you there. This is Kirk signing off for this series.